Bill, it's great to have you with us. Can you help us make sense of whether or not, from an overarching standpoint, the U.S. consumer is in a good spot, given what we've seen with the inflationary picture that really came to a head over the course of the last, say, 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, good morning. It's really interesting, Dan. The consumer's never been more in control than they are right now. They did suffer through really brutal inflation and rising prices. And as that started to ease, we've had all this discussion about tariffs. Tariffs are an interesting play for consumers, and we've heard what the CEOs think about them, obviously. But the tariff puts the consumer more in control because ultimately the consumer decides whether they're going to take the tariff or not. If there's a tariff on bananas and they buy oranges, is there really any tariff, right? And so that's ultimately where we are now. The consumer has more control and more power about where and how they spend their money.
And ultimately that translates into where the companies spend their money, right? Because in your example just now, if people make substitution type decisions to avoid tariffed products, that ultimately means the people who sell the consumers those tariffed or non-tariffed products change their product mix and adapt. So how exactly do you see that playing out, generally speaking, for these companies in the retail business over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, given what we now know and what we can forecast for tariffs in the future?
The short term, 6 to 12 months, is probably the most challenging because there's not a lot of certainty. We've had tariffs, they've been on, they've been off, they've been delayed, they've been changed. And I think what businesses really need before they make major decisions about capital, which is really what moving a manufacturing location entails, they need certainty, and they need to understand what it's going to be. Whether it's going to be 10% or 35% is a huge factor in deciding where you're going to source your product from.
All right, if that's the case, how exactly then do you, as an executive, navigate through that? Do you just have to wait and see and be reactionary, or are you laying out countless scenario analyses here to try to figure out what's going to happen? And if that's the case, is there a paralysis or limbo type effect until you have more of that clarity or certainty?
Most companies are really good at this stuff. This is what they do. When you read about the first blush through the tariffs, it can be shocking because if you don't change anything, the tariffs can be very impactful on your business, either through price increases or lost margin. But then as you move product and you mitigate and you push back on suppliers and you share the costs and make changes, they find a way through. If you just look at the release yesterday, I think I read on one of your competitive networks, 85% of the companies that reported have beat earnings. So companies are figuring out how to deal with it, and I think consumers are figuring out how to deal with what the companies are presenting to them. Are they going to take the price increase? Or are they going to not take the price increase? Are they going to make substitutions? I think the consumer is going to move products before they take a lot of pricing right now. They're still suffering from the pain of the inflation of 2 or 3 years ago.